Welcome to another episode of React tutorial series. In this video, we're going to explore component testing in more detail. In the first episode, we did the setup, we added some dependencies for the testing, and we also added some tests like app.test.tsx. This is one simple test we have added, but in this episode, we're going to explore this testing in more detail. So we initialized this project using create react app, right? And if you do that, if you use create react app, it will automatically add the react testing library. You can find in the packages, and if you check the dependencies, you can see these three items, that is testing library, jest, react, and user event. So these three dependencies are required if you want to use the react testing library. So the first question is, what is a react testing library? If you search Google React testing library, you can find this website testinglibrary.com and then React testing library documentation. So this is the library provided by React team for our component testing. You can definitely use some other testing library as well, but this is one of the popular testing library that comes with React setup. So definitely you can use it. But at the end of the day, it is your choice which testing library you want to use. But for our tutorial, we're going to use the React testing library only to understand how you can write unit tests. So the first setup process is that you have to install testing library /react, which is already there. If you use create react app to set up your application, then you should already have the dependencies. And for running those tests, we are using jest. So jest is a test runner. We have already configured jest in our first video. You can go ahead and watch that. So if you want to execute all the tests, you have to run the script. So I'm going to open a terminal and I'm going to execute the tests. So run npm run test. So it has opened one incremental console because we are running our jest with watch all. So internally in the React scripts, we are running jest with watch all, and that's why it is running this interactive console, and it is showing all the available options. If I press A, it will run all the tests. Now it is running app.test.tsx and it is passed. Also in the first episode, we have seen that if you use this jest extension for VS Code, this is the one, then you will get this tab called testing tab, and from VS Code only you will be able to run all the tests. So we have this app.test.tsx. If I run this, you can see that we are running this test inside VS Code. So that is something useful. You can try that. All right, so we're going to write our first test today. So while writing test, you might be curious about the file name structure. You can see that the file name structure of the tests it ends with .test, right? What it is, this is actually the default configuration of jest, but you can also override that by adding the packages, and you can add some jest block. Inside that you can add your jest configuration, but we're not going to do that now. We will use the default configuration only. So the default configuration is that if your file name ends with .test the extension, then that file will be considered as test, and React and jest will try to run those files. Now in order to start writing a new test, let me just add a new component and start testing that component. Let me write a simple component called user.tsx. So definitely the first line will be import react from react, and write one simple component called user, and let's export default in that component. And as we are using TypeScript, we have to also add the return type jsx.element, and this is a simple component, so we are going to return one simple div with some data like first name then last name. Let me also add some properties for this user component. Let me add first name and last name. So for first name, I'm going to write first name here and last name, and again, as it is TypeScript, I also have to add some type. So I'm creating a type for this user component interface. I'm going to write one interface user type. First name will be string, last name will be string. This username I'm going to use over here. So here I'm specifying that props of this user will be user type. All right, this is our simple component. Let's test this component at first. We have our page 1 component. Inside that, if I add this user with first name as first and last name as last, let's import this. Now you see we are rendering first name and last name. I have to add some more formatting. So in user, let me add some let me add some paragraph. Inside this paragraph, instead of first paragraph, I'm adding this first name and another paragraph for last name. First name is first and last name is last. Now we are going to test this user component. So first we need to figure out what are the things we are going to test. So we have this first name and last name. So definitely you can test like if you are passing some first name, then that first name should be rendered or last name should be rendered, right? So we're going to test in that way. So the first thing you have to do to test this component is that you have to write one test file. You have to create one test file, right? So I'm going to create one file called user.test.tsx. This is the naming pattern for writing any tests. That is the default jest configuration. So I have added this user.test.tsx file. Let me move this user.tsx file over here so that I can view the file while writing the test. Okay, let's check our React testing library documentation. You can find examples. This is one simple example that we can start. So for writing any test, you have to use this test function to define your test. So let's write that. The first thing you have to write is test, the name of the test. We're testing the first name, so let's write that first name. And the second parameter will be one function, and inside that function we have to write your test. So now this user component we are going to test, so you have to render it. So React testing library is providing one function called render to render the component in one enclosed environment, and then you can test it. I have to import render and then call render with our component user, and I'm calling with first name as first, or let's call it f1, first name f1, last name l1. As we're using JSX, we have to import React. Now that we have rendered it, we have to inspect each item. Like we have to inspect this first paragraph, first name, so that we can find out that our first name f1 is printed or not. How can we test that? For testing, we can add data test id equals to some id so that we can grab that element to inspect it. So for this first name, we can add first, and for last name, we can add last. I did some spelling mistake, test id. Now if you check the example, we are using this screen object. The screen object is used as a handler of the component. You can call some method from the screen object to grab the element. We have to import screen also, and then we can call screen.get test by id, get by test id first, and that is going to return our first name p, first name paragraph. Now if I add some breakpoint and debug this code, I should be able to get the first name paragraph object. Okay, you can see we are able to debug this and we're getting the first name paragraph. Okay, I'm going to close the debugger, and now we are going to write our assertion. So for assertion, we can use expect. So we are expecting first name p dot text content. So this text content will return first name colon f1 to be first name colon f1. Should work. Let me test. Yeah, this is working. Now if I write something else like first name f2, it will not pass. It will fail the test. That is failing because expected is first name f2, but we receive first name f1. Alright, this is how we test a simple component in React. Later we'll explore more complex testing. One more thing, suppose we want to run this test with different data. Here we are using only one first name, that is f1. But if you want to use multiple different strings or multiple different data sets, then you can use test.each, and then you can pass your data set as an array. So in this array, I can pass different names like f1, then f2, different things like null. You can also use null. All different boundary conditions you can write here. I will not use null here because my component is very simple. I'm not handling all the null conditions and all, so I'm just using two f1 and f2. Now how will you get these values in your test? You will get this name here in this function. So instead of rendering the user with name f1, I'm going to use name, and definitely this test will fail because I'm testing f1 So first one will pass, the second test will fail, right? If we check expected first name f1, received first name f2, so it is failing. So I have to make this assertion dynamic. How can we do that? Very simple. I just have to use name. So this function, right, this function is going to be called multiple times with different data. Now check if it is passing. Yeah, now it is passing. Now if you want to send multiple values, like for example, I can accept something like name and expected name, right? I'm getting two values from the data set. In that case, I can pass arrays for each test. So let's make it two-dimensional array. For first test, I'm going to pass expected as first name space f1. The second one will be f2. Now in the assertion, I'm going to just check the expected name, see if it is working. Yeah, now it is working. So what we're doing here, we are sending two arguments in this test function, and in this way you can write a very long test data. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're liking the series, then please subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, please ask in the comment section and I'll try to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.